Initiating Engram retrieval sequence. Archive designation C774 Omega. Extraction date 798 MIM41. Subject Valerius Corvus, formerly Cadian Shock Trooper, 88th Cadian Casercan. The air in the archive chamber felt thick, clinging to my respirator with the scent of ancient dust and forgotten sorrows. A single harsh light illuminated the holographic projection as the Engram began to coalesce. Charge: insubordination and dereliction of duty. Lex Imperialis 47 B9AT Delta. He was convicted of neglecting a strategic imperative during the fall of Cadia, resulting in a sentence of servitor conversion, class menial. This recording was recovered during routine cogitator maintenance in biologist facility Delta 9, the Foundries, and flagged for archival review due to anomalies. The Engram's integrity is fragmented yet remarkably persistent. A cautionary tale, perhaps, or a ghost refusing to fade. The initial image: a summer evening, vibrant with the amber glow of Cadia's twin suns. A young Valerius, no older than 10, sharing roasted root vegetables with his father. The rough calluses on the elder man's hands, a testament to years of toil. A simple memory, laced with the bittersweet tang of loss. Then the brutal shift, the relentless pounding of orc artillery, the acrid smell of burning promethium, the taste of grit and fear on his tongue. The faces of his comrades, Captain Marius Cale, his voice strained as he'd showed Valerius a datapad bearing a picture of a daughter he'd never see again. Sergeant Major Lyra Vaughn, the shared ration bar a fleeting moment of solace amidst the carnage. Old Man Tiber, pressing a small hand-carved wooden hawk into his palm, a silent blessing. By the Emperor's light, hold the line, he'd murmur, a mantra against the encroaching darkness. The moment of his arrest, a cruel intrusion. The cold bite of the shock maul against his temple. The harsh metallic clang echoing in the chaos of the evacuation. He remembered the horrified face of the wounded trooper he'd been trying to save, staring up at him, betrayal twisting his features as Commissar Holt's soldiers dragged him away. The last sight of Captain Cale, his eyes reflecting a pain Valerius couldn't decipher. Then the encroaching darkness, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and Magos Thraxis's emotionless gaze. The engram flickered, distorted. A fragment of a whispered prayer from a young astropath, Ilara clutching a worn scroll, a single shared ration bar, and then the agonizing descent.
Cadia, they say it was a fortress world. That's not wrong, but it was home. A harsh home, always braced for war. I remember the dust, the constant drone of defense turrets, smell of promethium. I grew up at the foot of the Great Bastion, listening to my father tell stories of the Greenskin raids. He was a veteran of a dozen orc incursions, a man carved from granite. I joined the Cadian Shock Troopers to follow in his footsteps, to earn my place amongst the defenders. Not for glory, not for reward, just duty. Simple as that. Before the war, before Cadia fell, there was Anya. Her hands, rough from working the hydroponics farms, carefully braiding my hair before a deployment. She always insisted it was for luck, but I knew it was because she missed me even when I was still there. We had a small garden, grew spices, a ridiculous indulgence on a fortress world, but she insisted. We planned a life, a family, a future that vanished. I was a simple soldier, a cog in the Imperial machine, but I had a name, a life, a purpose beyond holding the Imperial machine. By the Emperor's light, I had a life.
Valerius Corvus. The name echoes now, a ghost in the archives. Enlisted into the Cadian Shock Troopers at 18, a boy hardened by the constant vigilance of Cadia, eager to follow in the footsteps of his father, Sergeant Corvus, a man etched with the scars of the Third War for Armageddon. The Munitorum records are clinical, detailing standard aptitude scores, above-average tactical awareness, exceptional physical endurance. 15 years served with the 88th Cadian Casercan, a lifetime spent facing the Void's endless threats. Cyclopia Prime, the Z-Zorg Uprising, campaigns measured in fallen bodies and swallowed victories. Officially, no disciplinary infractions marred his record before the fall, but the engram flickers revealing a truth the files omit. Independent requests filed 3 times for transfer to a more active frontline unit, denied each time. The records offer no reason, only the frustrating label, "Not required." I remember the faint scent of ozone that always clung to his standard issue. Fatigues, the way he'd meticulously sharpen his loss cutter, a habit passed down from his father. He'd carry himself with a quiet stoicism, a shield against the constant pressure. I recall Anya's hands roughened by hydroponics farms, carefully braiding his hair before a deployment, a ritual he'd outwardly dismiss with a wry chuckle. He insisted it was for luck, but he knew it was a quiet expression of her longing. Then Captain Marius Cale, showing him a warm worn datapad, a faded picture of a young girl. His voice, usually firm, cracked slightly. "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." The fall, it shredded everything. The chaos of that evacuation, a maelstrom of screams, the stink of burning promethium, the desperate scramble for escape. And then the med bay, overflowing with the broken, the order to retreat, Valerius's defiant act, commandeering a crippled chimera, piling in the wounded, a blatant disregard for the Imperial directive, a momentary act of compassion, swiftly branded as treason. A moment I will never forget.
Anya, God's Anya. I remember her laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a dust storm. We would sit on the balcony watching the freighters come and go, sharing ration packs. She'd always find a way to spice them up, make them taste like something more. Captain Kale, a hard man, but fair. He showed me a worn data slate with a picture of his own daughter once. His voice cracked slightly as he said, "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." Lyra Vaughn, Sergeant Major. We shared a ration bar during a lull in the fighting against the Greenskins. The simple act of camaraderie felt sacred amidst the carnage. Old Man Tiber, our neighbor, a weathered soul who handed me a small, hand-carved wooden hawk for good luck, saying it was a guardian spirits from his ancestors. Sister Superior Aurelia, the confessor, placing a blessed amulet around my neck before deployment, her touch gentle and filled with unwavering faith. We were a community, a world built on sacrifice, filled with love. I fought for them, for Anya, for Kale's daughter, for Lyra, for Tiber, for Aurelia, for the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could hold the line and protect the things that mattered. They didn't ask if you wanted to be a soldier on Cadia. You were born into it. Generations of my family had stood watch against the Greenskins, the heretics, anything the galaxy threw at us. My father, a sergeant, tough as nails. He didn't smile much, but his hand on my shoulder spoke volumes. I didn't volunteer exactly. More like, accepted my fate. It wasn't a question of if, but when. The transport ship, the Sea Caduceus, felt more like a coffin, cramped, reeking of recycled air and fear. Thousands of us crammed into the hold, fresh-faced recruits alongside grizzled veterans. The training was brutal. Endless drills, live fire exercises, all designed to strip away any shred of humanity and forge us into weapons. I met Lyra Vaughn during a weapons maintenance detail. Sergeant Major, tough as they come, but she had a dry wit. We shared a ration bar once, a small act of normalcy. Then came my squad, 8 of us. Captain Kale was the leader, stern but respected officer. He'd seen things, you could tell. There was also Old Man Tiber, always muttering about guardian spirits and handing out hand-carved trinkets. He gave me a wooden hawk, said it would bring me luck. Gods, I wish. Everything felt routine then. A grim routine, yes, but routine nonetheless. The last time I felt anything resembling normal before the sky turned black. The orbital bombardment hit like a god's wrath. The Caduceus shuddered violently as we dropped into the atmosphere. Outside, the sky was a swirling vortex of black and crimson. Cadia was already burning. We landed near Kazarkin Fortress, amidst a scene of utter devastation. Buildings were collapsing, fires raged, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burning promethium. That's when I first saw them, the traitors. Chaos Space Marines, clad in corrupted power armor, their banners depicting twisted symbols of the ruinous powers. They moved with a horrifying grace, cutting through our lines like a scythe through wheat. Fire streaked across the battlefield, illuminating their grotesque forms. The ground vibrated with the thud of heavy weapons. The first thing that hit me wasn't the explosion. It was the screaming. The inhuman roars of the Chaos Warriors. The desperate cries of our comrades. We were thrown into the meat grinder immediately. Our squad was assigned to hold a ruined sector of the fortress. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters, constant pressure. Last fire melted the stonework around us. I remember seeing Sergeant Major Vaughn cut down by a power sword, her last breath a curse at the enemy. That's when it stopped being a war and became a massacre. The light went out of my eyes that day. Everything changed. The explosion, laser fire heavy.
The fall of Cadia, designated a Class Omega strategic catastrophe. The words felt like ash in my mouth, another bureaucratic label slapped onto a tragedy that swallowed a world. Initial Chaos incursion launched 798.M41. I remember the heat shimmering off the plains, the twin suns of Cadia beating down with relentless intensity. My father used to say they warmed the soul. Now they felt like the prelude to a funeral pyre. Forces deployed 88th Cadian Kazarkin Regiment alongside elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Adeptus Sororitas, a desperate coalition against an encroaching tide. Estimated Cadian casualties, 97%. Numbers. Cold, impersonal numbers that didn't account for Anya's laugh or the comforting weight of Old Man Tiber's carved hawk in my pocket. Estiatic medium. The hum of the datapad. A constant, unsettling drone. Strategic outcome. Planetary breach. Cadia designated lost. A euphemism. It meant erasure. It meant oblivion. It meant Anya. This record record is classified under Lex Imperialis, Subsector Gamma 7 restricted access. Further details remain sealed pending investigation. Lies. They'd scrub the truth, sanitize the horror for the consumption of those safely tucked away in their ivory towers. Analysis of the 88 Cadians' final stand remains incomplete because they didn't want it to be complete. They didn't want the truth about why I disobeyed, why I loaded those wounded soldiers onto that battered chimera, risking everything. The memory still burns. Captain Cale's face etched with a sorrow he couldn't voice, his hand briefly resting on my shoulder, then withdrawing as the order to fall back was reiterated. "Hold the line, Corvus." A hollow promise. Faint crackling, like failing electronics. I saw Ilara then, a young astropath in training, huddled in a cell, her face streaked with tears. I offered her the last of my ration bar, a small comfort in a sea of despair. "By the Emperor's light," I'd mumbled. "It'll be all right." A lie, but what else could I say? The last thing I saw before the cranial drill whirred to life was the horrified face of the trooper I'd rescued, staring up at me as the commissariat dragged me away. Then, nothing. Only a fracturing.
Days blurred into a nightmarish cycle of attack and retreat. We were pushed back, sector by sector, towards the central fortress. The enemy wasn't just the Chaos Marines, it was the things ski they brought with them. Demonic entities, twisted parodies of life, tearing through our ranks. I saw a creature rip a man in half with its bare claws. The sound, I still hear it in my sleep. Old man Tyber didn't last long. A stray shell took him down. I tried to reach him, but Kale pulled me back, screaming, "Corvus, stay focused!" He was right, of course. There was no time for grief. No time for anything but survival. We were holding a makeshift barricade, a pile of rubble and shattered plasteel. Blast fire crisscrossed the area, illuminating the faces of my squad mates, faces etched with exhaustion and terror. Then it happened. A massive warp rift opened up above us, spewing forth a torrent of daemons. They descended like locusts, overwhelming our defenses. Young Trooper Ilara, fresh out of training, froze in fear. A daemon lunged at her, claws extended. I pushed her aside, taking the blow myself. The pain was searing, but it wasn't the pain that mattered. It was the look in her eyes, the pure, unadulterated terror. That's when I realized we weren't going to win. We were just delaying the inevitable. And I knew with sickening certainty that Cadia was doomed. Screams, demonic, roars heavy. 3 days after the orbital bombardment, the fighting had devolved into a desperate close-quarters brawl. Cascan Fortress, once an unshakable bastion, was bleeding. We were pushing back the traitors, yard by agonizing yard, but the cost was unimaginable. It wasn't just the Chaos Space Marines, though they were horrifying enough. It was what they summoned. I saw it with my own eyes. A thing of pure nightmare. A daemon, towering over the wreckage of a command bunker, feeding on the souls of the fallen. Screams, distorted and inhuman. Heavy. But it wasn't the daemon itself that broke me. It was what happened before. Captain Kale, my squad leader, a man I trusted with my life, he was giving orders, clear as day, to pull back artillery support from a crucial sector. That it was a strategic necessity. But I saw him exchanging a look with a man in inquisitorial robes, a pale, gaunt figure I'd never seen before. A quick nod, a subtle gesture. They were sacrificing that sector, letting the enemy break through, covering up a secret. And then, the friendly fire. A last cannon battery, seemingly malfunctioning, opened up on our own troops. I saw Sergeant Major Vaughn, Lyra, cut down right in front of me. It was dismissed as a technical error, a tragic accident of war. But I knew it wasn't. It was deliberate. They were silencing anyone who might have questioned the order. By the Emperor's light, it was a betrayal, a cold, calculated betrayal. A truth no one was meant to see. I saw too much, and that's when my fate was sealed. Got it. Low hum. Medium. Ordered it to the nearest officer I could find. Told him what I saw. About KL. About the artillery. About the things happening beyond the official reports. I expected an investigation. I expected justice. What I got was a cold stare and a summons to the commissariat. Marching boots. Metallic clicks. IN-10. Commissar Holt, a man carved from granite, eyes like chips of ice. He listened, impassive, as I laid out my evidence, but he wasn't interested in evidence. He was interested in obedience. He accused me of spreading dissent, of undermining morale, of being a liability in a time of crisis. He said I was seeing ghosts, that the stress of battle had clouded my judgment. I refused to recant. I told him I would stand by my testimony, even if it meant my death. That's when it happened. I refused to give the order to fall back. There were still wounded in that med bay, men and women clinging to life. My unit was ordered to evacuate, to rejoin the main force. I wouldn't lead them. I commandeered a damaged chimera, intending to get them to safety. Holt's face, it was like looking into the abyss. Insubordination, he spat. Dereliction of duty. His hand moved to his bolt pistol. That was the last time I saw Captain Kale, his eyes filled with a pity I didn't want. He knew what was coming, and he did nothing. Bolt. Pistol fire. Single shot. Intense.
Valerius Corvus. Designation, Cadian Shock Trooper, 88 Cadian Kazarkan. The records were crisp, clinical. Charges, insubordination, dereliction of duty, witnessing classified events, potential moral contamination. Sentence, Servitor, conversion, class menial. Neural Engram extraction, mandatory per Lex Imperialis 47, B98, Delta. Routine paperwork, the final accounting of a life deemed expendable, D98. A necessary sacrifice for the Imperium's survival. He'd once believed that wholeheartedly. Now, the words felt like ash in his mouth. Silence. A thick, oppressive silence that hummed with the dread of things to come, punctuated only by the rhythmic hiss of ventilation. Medium. The air damp and smelling faintly of ozone and something metallic. He remembered Anya's hands, rough and calloused from the hydroponics farms, braiding his hair before deployment. A ritual she'd insisted was for luck, though he knew it was simply because she'd miss him, even in his absence. The warmth of her touch felt like a phantom limb now. Then Captain Kale showing him a tarnished data slate, a blurry image of his daughter smiling. "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." Kale's voice had cracked, a rare display of emotion from the stoic leader. A memory flickered. Sergeant Major Lyra Vaughn, sharing a ration bar during a brief respite amidst the orcish onslaught, the simple act feeling sacred in the face of utter carnage. Old Man Tiber's hand-carved wooden hawk, a guardian spirit from his ancestors, felt impossibly distant, a distant, echoing clang of metal on metal. The cell had held a young astropath in training, Elara, weeping silently, clutching a prayer scroll. He'd given her his last ration bar, a hollow gesture of comfort. Now, those memories were fractured, splintering under the relentless pressure. Amagos Thraxus loomed, a figure of clinical detachment and augmented eyes reflecting a pulsating red light. The table, the cold, gleaming table, awaited. The cranial drill's whine began, a high-pitched scream against the silence. Pain erupted, searing and blinding. Then, nothing, just fragments. Anya's face, bathed in the golden light of Cadia's twin suns. A single, desperate thought, a whisper lost to the void. Protect them. Whirring, intensifying.
The cell. It was cold, damp, smelled of despair. They threw me in with the others, the broken, the discarded, astropaths who'd seen too much of the warp, guardsmen who'd questioned orders, tech adepts who'd tinkered with forbidden knowledge. One girl, Elara, an astropath in training, barely a woman. She was weeping, clutching a worn prayer scroll. I shared my last ration bar with her, offered a few words of comfort. It felt pathetic. What good were words? What good was anything? We talked through the night, if you could call it talking. Fragments of stories, whispered hopes, desperate pleas to the Emperor. She dreamt of returning to her family, of seeing the stars again. I just wanted Anya to remember me. Iber's hawk. Silly little carving. I wished I'd held on to it. The sounds from the facility, they were the worst. The whine of drills, the screams, muffled, distorted, but unmistakable. And the shuffle of the completed servitors, moving like automatons down the corridors. Soulless. Empty. That's what they were turning us into. Dripping waiter. Distant screams. Like... I closed my eyes, trying to conjure Anya's face the way the golden light of Cadia's twin suns used to catch in her hair. A single thought, burning bright amidst the darkness. Protect them. Even if I couldn't protect her. Even if I was no longer myself, I had to try. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. I was already fading, becoming something else, something less. Static, increasing volume. They didn't bother with a trial, not really, just processed me. A few questions, a cursory review of Commissar Holt's report, and then the order came down. Servitor conversion. And so began the walk. Down, down, down into the guts of Koskin Fortress. It wasn't the fortress I remembered. Not anymore. The upper levels were gone. Just twisted metal and dust. But down here, the structure held. A morbid parody of its former self. The air grew thick, heavy with the smell of antiseptic, of machine oil, of something sterile and wrong. Each step felt like lead. I passed them in the corridors, the completed ones. Men and women, once brothers and sisters in arms, now shuffling automatons. Their eyes vacant, their movements mechanical. I recognized Sergeant Major Vaughn's gait, even stripped of all humanity. Gods, Lyra, she used to share her ration bar with me during the orc incursions. I averted my gaze, couldn't bear to see what they'd done to her. My legs, they barely wanted to move. Each stride was an act of defiance, a protest my body didn't have the strength to fully express. The tech priests were waiting at the end of the hall, faces hidden behind respirators and augmented lenses. They didn't acknowledge me, didn't need to. I was just another component, another machine to be built. My mind raced, trying to cling to every memory, every face. Anya, my father, Captain Kale, the golden light of Cadia's twin suns. It was slipping away already. I could feel it. Skipping, waiter, distant mechanical humming. Very tension. The table was cold, steel, slick with something. They strapped me down, limbs immobilized. Surgical servitors, their multi-limb bodies moving with terrifying precision, began positioning instruments, scalpels, drills, neural probes, gleaming under the harsh, pulsating red lights. A Magos biologist, Thraxus, his name. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His eyes, augmented with lenses and data feeds, scanned me like a piece of equipment. The rites of preparation, chants in a language I didn't understand, the scent of ozone and burning metal. Then I saw it. The cranial drill, a long rotating shaft of polished steel. My voice, it cracked. By the Emperor's light, I tried to pray, to plead, to bargain, but the words felt fragmented. Anya! The name escaped my lips, a whisper lost in the hum of the machinery. Father, Kale, I saw their faces, fleeting images, distorted by pain and fear. Hold the line, I kept repeating it. Hold the line. It was all I had left, but the drill descended closer, 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 and the memories, they were unraveling. Cadia, the plains, the battle, it all blurred into a chaotic mess. Protect them, protect. The pain exploded in my skull, a searing, white-hot agony. Pitch-pitched whining, mechanical grinding, a muffled scream. Intense pain, fear.
From this point forward, the neural engram exhibits catastrophic degradation. Memory fragmentation is severe, temporal displacement common. Identity dissolution proceeds at an accelerated rate. Recording quality is significantly compromised, but analysis confirms standard pre-conversion neural extraction protocols were observed. Despite the degradation, continued archival is recommended. The subject's initial experiences offer valuable insight into the psychological impact of imperial penal procedures. Static, faint mechanical hum, overlaid with a high-pitched whine that seems to burrow into the skull. Light, reflection, harsh and clinical, bouncing off sterile white surfaces. The initial recollections are fractured. Sun-drenched fields of golden grain under Cadia's twin sons. A rough hand, calloused from years of labor, braiding his hair. Anya. Her scent, a blend of hydroponic herbs and something uniquely her, lingered even as the memory flickered. "For luck, Valerius," she'd murmur, her eyes filled with a love he'd taken for granted. Distorted, echoing laughter. Anya's, his father's. Then, the shift, the weight of a lasgun, the roar of a siege cannon, the constant thrum of vigilance. Training with his father, a veteran haunted by orc incursions, the old man's gruff lessons echoing in his mind. "Hold the line, Valerius." Cadia endures. A worn data slate held the picture of a young girl, Captain Kale showing it to him. "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." The stench of burning promethium and the metallic tang of fear, the evacuation, the chaos, the screaming, and then the agonizing decision, a chimera, its engines sputtering, a medbay overflowing with the broken, orders to fall back, but the faces, young, old, wounded beyond measure, a choked sob, almost swallowed by the static. "By the Emperor's light," he'd muttered, defying the order. The shock maul struck, a blinding jolt, the cold, hard steel of restraints biting into his wrists. Kale's eyes, once filled with respect, now held only a desolate professional sorrow. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just the crushing weight of betrayal, a low, guttural prayer from a young astropath clutching a prayer scroll. The shared ration bar, a fleeting moment of solace. Then, the table. Magos Thraxus's emotionless gaze, the glint of surgical tools. A single thought, piercing the encroaching darkness. Anya, protect them. A sudden deafening crack. The smell of burning flesh fading.
Anya, her hands, rough, callous, stained with the ochre dust of the hydroponics farms, braiding my hair. Not neatly, but with a fierce tenderness, always insisting it was for luck. A cruel jest now. Sunlight filtered through the grimy half window, painted dust motes in slow, agonizing dances, mocking the chaos I left behind. Scent of roasted root vegetables, a ghost of a memory, clung to the recycled air, bringing with it the phantom weight of my father's hand on my shoulder, his booming laugh echoing in the void. He'd tell stories of orc incursions, of holding the line against impossible odds. I'd vowed then to carry on his legacy. The taste of water, cold, metallic, a forgotten luxury. The last sensation before this. I remember building a clumsy birdhouse with old man Tiber, the wood rough beneath my clumsy hand. He'd given me a small hand-carved wooden hawk, wings chipped and imperfect. A guardian spirit, Valerius, he'd rasped, his eyes crinkling, to watch over you. Protect them. But who are foyers? Them anymore. Faces flicker. Captain Kale, his usually stern features etched with a weary kindness as he showed me a data slate picture of his daughter. His voice cracking. "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." Sergeant Major Lyra Vaughn, the simple act of sharing a ration bar with her amidst the cacophony of greenskin warfare feeling sacred. The weight of my lasgun, familiar comforting feel of the stock against my shoulder. Now just a phantom limb sensation. The red, always the red of battle, the crimson of spilled blood, searing itself onto my memory. Hold the line, I hear the orders, fractured and distant. Lyra's smile, a bright beacon extinguished too soon. Gone, all gone. I am MNL 72983 Gamma. That's what they call me now. Cadia. A name choked by dust and regret. It's slipping, dissolving like a drep. It's slipping, dissolving like a drem threatened by a harsh dawn. A wisp of Sister Superior Aurelia's presence remains, the gentle pressure of a blessed amulet against my skin, a faint scent of incense. Protect them. The memory flickers. Anya's face bathed in the impossible golden light of Cadia's twin sons. A single, desperate thought, a primal directive. Protect them. All repeated glitches, distorted echoes, fading whispers. Medium, despair, the rhythmic clang of metal on stone. I was Valerius Corvus, Cadian Shock Trooper, 88 Castrican, born on Cadia like my father before me. By the Emperor's light, it feels like a lifetime ago. They say Cadia stood vigilant for 10,000 years, a shield against the horrors of the warp, a home. I remember the dust, the heat, the constant thrum of the fortress defenses, the smell of gun oil and recycled air. Anya, my wife, her hands, rough from the hydroponics farms, carefully braiding my hair before deployment. She always insisted it was for luck. I was a soldier, trained to kill, to endure, to hold the line. But I was also something more. I knew the names of the men in my squad. Lyra Vaughn, always sharing her ration bar, even when she barely had enough for herself. Marius Kael, my captain, showing me a picture of his daughter, telling me to fight for what's worth saving. Those faces, they're fading. Valerius Corvus, Cadia, like trying to grasp smoke. The words feel wrong, distorted. Corvus. Corvus? No? Baroche? Cadia? Was it a city? A fortress? A dream? I was. I dreamed? I was something. But what? What was I? The drills? They're not just taking memories, are they? They're taking... There was a moment, just before the encroaching darkness swallowed everything. The pain was a white-hot brand against my skull, a searing fire that threatened to consume my very being. They had me strapped down, cold and unyielding, to a surgical table bathed in the sickly green glow of biologist Fidelity Delta 9. The servitors, metallic and utterly devoid of empathy, moved with a terrifying efficiency, preparing to dismantle me. But for one fleeting instant, amidst the chaos, everything cleared. Not memories, not faces, though they flickered at the edges. Anya's hands, rough from hydroponics, carefully braiding my hair, a gesture of luck she insisted upon, silent comfort. Captain Kale, showing me a tarnished data slate, his voice cracking as he urged me to fight for what was worth saving. Old Man Tiber's gift, a small wooden hawk clutched in my hand. These fragmented images, ghosts of a life stolen. It wasn't memories themselves, but something deeper. A purpose distilled to its raw essence. If anyone can hear this, beyond the servitor's hum and the Magus' cold pronouncements, tell Anya. Tell her I fought. Tell her I didn't falter even when the Emperor's light seemed to dim. Tell her I did everything I could to protect Cadia, to shield her from the encroaching darkness. Tell her I thought of her every moment, the memory of her laughter, a fragile shield against rushing bear. Even on this table facing oblivion. Gods I loved, a love that spanned the plains of Cadia, a love that felt as vast as the stars themselves. And Marius, Captain Kale, thank you for the training, the discipline, the quiet dignity, for showing me what it meant to be a soldier, to be a man. I failed you, failed Cadia. I disobeyed a direct order, prioritized the wounded over a strategic retreat, but I tried. I truly tried. Protect them, protect those who are worth saving. It's all that matters. A final, frantic prayer.
Conversion procedure concluded on schedule. Subject designated MNL 7283 Gamma. Current operational status functional. Assigned to rubble removal detail, outer ruins of Kazurkan Fortress, Cadia. Preliminary scans indicated no residual cognitive function. Neural pathways effectively overwritten. All higher order thought processes suppressed. The subject demonstrates optimal efficiency in designated task. Filing reference archived. The rumble wasn't the distant echo of artillery fire anymore, not the familiar tremor that once defined Cadia. It was the grinding of ancient stone against rusted metal, the lament of a world broken and being rebuilt by hands that no longer remembered why. My hands. These hands, once calloused from gripping a Lazrafal, now scraped against the rough gray surface of a broken hab block, forcing it into a precarious pile. 7 years. 7 years since the cold steel of the restraints had clamped down, since the searing, unimaginable pain had swallowed everything whole. 7 years since Anya's face, framed by the golden light of Cadia's twin sons, faded into the static of oblivion. I remember, a flicker, a phantom ache, her rough hands braiding my hair, a ritual before every deployment, a silent promise of return, a promise broken. My designation, MNL 72983 Gamma, echoes in the silence of my programming. A number, not a name. There's a hollowness where Valerius Corvus used to be, replaced by the mechanical obedience of a servitor. A fleeting image, Captain Cale, his voice cracking as he said, "Fight for them, Corvus. Fight for what's worth saving." Did he remember? Did anyone? Sometimes I pause. A near imperceptible hitch in the rhythmic hauling. A whirring of Servitor hydraulics as my head rotates. A futile search within the debris. A flash of memory. The frantic cries in the med bay. The faces of the wounded. The desperate hope in a young astropath's eyes as I shared my last ration bar. A girl, Ilara, clinging to a prayer scroll, her sobs muffled. The constant drip of water leaking from a fractured ceiling somewhere deep within the ruins is a persistent reminder of the ceaseless decay. Anya. The thought fragments, like shattered glass, but the feeling remains: protect. A single desperate command echoing in the void of my repurposed mind. Back to work. The rubble waits. Record C774. Omega sealed. Archive status active. The data stream shimmers, a fractured echo of a life lost. One Engram extracted from the countless souls swallowed by the fall of Cadia. It's a whisper against the roaring tide of Imperial oblivion. A single soldier reduced to data. A testament to the cost of vigilance. One life and millions more, likely forgotten. The Imperium demands sacrifice. The archives remember. The memory begins. Sunlight, warm and golden, filters across the plains of Cadia, illuminating a young Valerius Corvus, barely 10 years old, sharing roasted root vegetables with his father. A simple moment, a perfect Cadia evening. But the idyllic scene fractures, replaced by the brutal metallic pang of war. The screams, the explosions, the constant fear. Years later, the clipped, practiced cadence of a Cadian Shock Trooper echoes, "Hold the line," as Valerius, now a hardened man, braces against the relentless orc advance. He remembers Anya's hands, roughened from hydroponics, carefully braiding his hair before deployment, her touch a fleeting warmth against the grim duty ahead. Then comes the chaos, the catastrophic retreat, the echoing clang of twisted metal, the acrid smell of burning promethium, the sight of the ravaged med bay overflowing with the wounded, the agonizing decision. He overrides orders, commandeers a crippled chimera, hauling survivors from the path of destruction. The betrayal etched on Captain Cale's face as Commissar Holt's men descended, the brutal shock of the shock mauls, the cold press of restraints, a trooper's desperate protest cut short by a single precise shot. The last thing he saw was the horrified face of a young trooper he'd been trying to save, staring up at him. Then, the sterile white of biologist facility Delta 9, the foundry, assaulted his senses. The metallic tang of antiseptic, the chilling hum of servitors, the Magos Thraxus's cold, augmented eyes. Pain, loss, dissolution. Anya's face, bathed in Cadia's golden light. A single thought, a final, desperate plea. Protect them. MNL 72983 Gamma. Relentlessly hauling broken concrete from the ruins of Kasserkin Fortress. He pauses, a mechanical twitch of the head, scanning the rubble as if searching for something lost. The pauses are brief, but unnervingly frequent near the shattered remains of the med bay. The Imperium demands sacrifice. The archives remember.